How does a marriage end? Is it in a courtroom, with a stack of evidence on the table and your secrets projected for all to see? Or does it start the moment you laugh at your husband's expense, certain he'll never see the truth you parade right in front of his eyes? The conference room buzzed with holiday cheer as I clicked to the next slide of my presentation. 23 coworkers leaned forward, wine glasses in hand, waiting for the punchline they knew was coming. And here we have Mark's idea of romance, I announced, gesturing at the photo of my husband reading a cybersecurity manual in bed. He actually thinks I don't notice when he falls asleep mid-sentence during our quality time. The room erupted in laughter. Janet from accounting nearly choked on her champagne. Even our usually stern HR director, Ms. Xu, cracked a smile from the back corner. But wait, there's more, I continued, my confidence soaring. This was exactly the reaction I'd hoped for. After months of feeling invisible in my marriage, finally I had an audience that appreciated my wit. Mark is so oblivious to everything around him that I could probably train a marching band in our living room, and he'd just ask me to keep it down because he's analyzing threat vectors. More laughter. Devin Santos, sitting in the third row with his perfectly styled hair, and that smile that made my stomach flutter, gave me an encouraging nod. We'd been meeting for coffee after work for 3 months now, and those conversations had gradually shifted from professional to personal to something else entirely. The man once spent 4 hours explaining blockchain security to our 7-year-old daughter, I said, clicking to a photo of Mark, gesturing enthusiastically at his laptop, while Tessa looked utterly bewildered. Tessa asked if she could have ice cream for dinner, and Mark said, "Sure, honey," without even looking up. "Classic Mark," someone called out from the audience. "Oh, you haven't heard the best part yet," I said, warming to my theme. Last month, I told him I was joining a gym, started going out 3 nights a week for fitness classes. The man was so supportive, he even bought me a new gym bag. I paused for dramatic effect. I've been using it to carry wine and chocolate to book club meetings at various hotels downtown. The laughter was infectious now. Even I was caught up in it, feeling clever and modern and sophisticated. This wasn't cruel. This was just how couples talk these days, right? We were all adults here. Mark was a good provider, a decent father, but he was also emotionally distant, buried in his work, completely checked out of our marriage. If he couldn't be bothered to pay attention to his wife, then he deserved to be the subject of a few harmless jokes. The best part, I continued, is that he actually thinks I'm getting in shape. Asked me last week if I was feeling more energetic from all the exercise. I made air quotes with my fingers. I told him absolutely. Nothing like a good workout to get the blood pumping. Devin's eyes met mine across the room, and I felt that familiar flutter. He knew exactly what kind of workouts I'd been getting. So here's to Mark, I raised my wine glass, the most trusting husband in America. May he never change his password or check his credit card statements too closely. The toast was enthusiastic. Glasses clinked, people applauded, and I basked in the attention. For the first time in years, I felt witty and desirable and appreciated. That's when I noticed him. Mark stood in the doorway of the conference room, still wearing his government-issued jacket, his federal badge visible on his belt. His face wore that same calm, analytical expression he brought to crime scenes, the one that had always made me feel like he was studying evidence rather than looking at his wife. But tonight, something was different. He was holding his phone, and the red recording dot was clearly visible on the screen. "Don't mind me," he said quietly, his voice carrying that same measured tone he used when testifying in court. "Just documenting the presentation for quality assurance purposes." A few people turned to look at him, but most were still caught up in the laughter and wine. I felt a momentary flutter of panic, but then reminded myself that this was Mark we were talking about, the man who needed GPS to find the grocery store we'd been shopping at for 5 years. He probably thought he was being helpful, recording my comedy routine to show me later. "Hi, honey," I called out, forcing a bright smile. "Just sharing some funny stories about married life. You know how it is." "I do indeed," Mark replied, still recording. He stepped further into the room, and I noticed several of my coworkers shifting uncomfortably. There was something about Mark's presence that always made people remember he spent his days tracking down cyber criminals and building federal cases. Mark's timing is perfect, I announced, trying to regain control of the room's energy. He can verify that everything I've said is absolutely true. Right, sweetheart. You did buy me that gym bag, didn't you? I did, Mark confirmed, his phone still pointed in my direction. Charged it to our joint credit card on September 15th, along with your gym membership fee, which I noticed was quite expensive for a basic fitness facility. Something in his tone made me pause, but I pushed forward. Well, you get what you pay for, right? Quality instruction doesn't come cheap. No, Mark agreed. It certainly doesn't. I've been very interested in tracking the return on our investment. The data has been quite illuminating. A few more people were looking between us now, sensing an undercurrent they couldn't quite identify. But Mark's expression remained perfectly pleasant, almost serene. Well, I said, clicking to close my presentation, I think that's enough embarrassing my husband for one evening. Thank you all for being such a wonderful audience. The applause was warm, and people began to disperse, heading back to the main party area. As they filed out chatting and laughing, Mark remained by the door, finally lowering his phone. Interesting presentation, he said once we were alone. Very comprehensive. You covered a lot of ground. Just having some fun, I replied, gathering my things. You know, I don't mean anything by it. Oh, I know exactly what you mean, Mark said. I've always found it fascinating how much truth people reveal when they think no one important is listening. He turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. By the way, Lysandra, I hope you enjoyed tonight. I have a feeling Monday is going to be very interesting for both of us. The way he said my full name, not Lysa, not Honey, but Lysandra, sent a chill down my spine. But before I could respond, he was gone, leaving me alone in the conference room with the lingering scent of his cologne and a growing sense of unease. I shook it off. This was Mark, after all. The man who once spent an entire weekend trying to figure out why our Wi-Fi was running slowly, only to discover he'd been running a system update that I'd started 3 days earlier. He was methodical and thorough, but he wasn't exactly known for his emotional intelligence or his ability to read between the lines. Still, as I gathered my purse and headed back to the party, I couldn't shake the image of that red recording dot or the way Mark had said the word data like he was discussing evidence in a federal courtroom. I woke up Sunday morning to the sound of Mark's fingers clicking across his laptop keyboard. He was sitting at the kitchen table, still in his pajamas, surrounded by what looked like printed emails and bank statements. Our daughter Tessa was at the counter, methodically working her way through a bowl of cereal while watching cartoons on her tablet. "Morning, family," I said, trying to inject some normalcy into the scene. "Mark, you're up early for a weekend." "Just catching up on some work," he replied without looking up from his screen. "You know how it is in federal cybersecurity. The criminals don't take weekends off." There was something different about his tone, still calm, still measured, but with an undercurrent I couldn't quite identify. I poured myself coffee and tried to peer over his shoulder, but he angled the laptop away from me with a subtle movement. "Anything interesting?" I asked. "Very," Mark said. "I'm working on a case involving digital evidence recovery. It's amazing what people think they can permanently delete these days. Cloud backups, metadata, cached files. It all leaves a trail if you know where to look." I felt a small flutter of anxiety. Sounds complicated. Not really. Most people make the same mistakes. They delete messages from their phone, but forget about automatic cloud synchronization. They clear their browser history, but ignore the DNS cache. They think incognito mode makes them invisible, but they forget about credit card statements and location services. Mark's fingers never stopped moving across the keyboard as he spoke. I noticed he had multiple browser windows open, and one of them looked suspiciously like our bank's website. "Daddy," Tessa piped up. Why did you sleep in the guest room again? The question hung in the air. Mark's typing paused for just a moment. Sometimes grown-ups need their own space to think, he said gently. It doesn't mean anything bad, sweetheart. But I caught the way he looked at me when he said it. Not angry, not hurt, just analytical. Like I was a puzzle he was in the process of solving. I should check my emails, I said, pulling out my phone. Probably have a bunch of messages about last night's party. I opened my email app and immediately noticed something odd. There was a password reset confirmation from my cloud storage account, dated at 3:47 a.m. I definitely hadn't requested that. Mark, I said carefully, did you use my laptop for anything last night? No, he replied. Why? Just got a weird email, probably spam. But as I scrolled through my messages, I found 3 more password reset confirmations, one for my social media account, one for my messaging app, and one for my photo storage. All sent in the early hours of the morning. My phone buzzed with a text from Devin. Hope you're feeling okay this morning. Last night was intense. Did your husband say anything about the presentation? I quickly deleted the message, but not before noticing that my message history with Devin seemed shorter than it should be. We'd been texting regularly for months, but I could only see conversations going back about 2 weeks. I need to run some errands, I announced, grabbing my purse. Tessa, want to come with Mommy to the store? Can I stay with Daddy? She asked. He said he might show me how his work computer can find hidden files. Mark looked up from his laptop for the first time that morning. Educational opportunity, he said with a slight smile. I thought she might find digital forensics interesting. There was definitely something unsettling about the way he emphasized those last 2 words, but I forced a smile. Sounds fun. I'll be back in a couple of hours. I drove to the mall, but instead of shopping, I found myself sitting in the parking lot, scrolling through my phone and trying to piece together what felt wrong. The password resets, the missing message history, Mark's strange behavior, it all felt connected somehow. I called Devin. Hey, he answered on the second ring. I was hoping I'd hear from you. Are you okay? You seemed a little rattled after your husband showed up last night. I'm fine, I said, but I think something's wrong with my phone. I'm missing a bunch of our old messages. That's weird. Mine are all here. Want me to screenshot some of them and send them back to you? No, I said quickly. I mean, that's okay. They're probably just in a different folder or something. But even as I said it, I was remembering Mark's words from that morning. It's amazing what people think they can permanently delete these days. Devin, I said slowly, you don't think Mark suspects anything, do you? About us? No way. The guy's completely oblivious. You said so yourself. He doesn't pay attention to anything that's not on a computer screen. That should have been reassuring, but something about Mark's behavior that morning suggested he was paying very close attention indeed. Listen, Devin continued, I've been thinking about what you said last night, about the hotel meetings. Maybe we should be more careful about the paper trail. What do you mean? Well, you've been using your joint credit card for the hotel rooms, right? And I've been badging into the office after hours to use the conference room for our project meetings. If someone really wanted to check up on us, they could probably piece together a timeline. My blood ran cold. You think someone's checking up on us? Probably not, but your husband works in cybersecurity, right? Those guys are paranoid by nature. Maybe we should just be extra cautious going forward. After we hung up, I sat in my car for another 20 minutes, trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. Mark was methodical and thorough, but he was also emotionally distant and completely absorbed in his work. The idea that he would suddenly develop the emotional intelligence to detect an affair seemed unlikely. But when I got home, I found him in his study, surrounded by even more printed documents. And this time, I could clearly see what he was looking at. Bank statements with highlighted charges, printouts of what looked like hotel receipts, and a timeline written in his precise handwriting. Find everything you needed at the store? He asked without looking up. Yes, I lied, realizing I'd forgotten to actually buy anything. Good. I've been having a very productive afternoon myself. You know, it's interesting what you can learn about someone's habits when you really start paying attention to the data. He finally looked up at me, and his expression was perfectly calm, perfectly pleasant, and absolutely terrifying. I think we should have a family meeting soon, he said. There are some things we need to discuss. That night, as I lay in our empty bed, listening to Mark typing in the guest room until well past midnight, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd made a terrible miscalculation. I'd assumed Mark's emotional distance meant he was oblivious to everything around him, but what if his distance wasn't obliviousness at all? What if it was simply the methodical patience of someone who knew exactly how to build an airtight case? Monday morning arrived with an email that made my stomach drop. The subject line read, "Credit card account, payment declined." I opened it with trembling fingers. Our joint credit card had been declined for a charge at the Riverside Hotel downtown, the same hotel where Devon and I had been meeting for the past month. The same hotel where I'd told Mark I was attending advanced fitness classes. I immediately called the credit card company. "Mrs. Vane," the customer service representative said, "I show that your account has been flagged for unusual activity. Your husband called on Friday to review recent charges and requested that we monitor any transactions at hospitality venues." He what? He mentioned concerns about potential fraud. Any hotel, restaurant, or entertainment charges over $50 now require secondary authorization from the primary account holder. My hands were shaking as I hung up. Mark had effectively cut off my access to our joint finances without saying a word to me about it. I tried calling Devon, but his phone went straight to voicemail. When I got to the office, his desk was empty. "Where's Devon?" I asked Janet from accounting. "IT called him in for some kind of audit," she replied. "Something about unusual after-hours access to the building. You know how paranoid they get about security." My blood turned to ice. I remembered Devon mentioning that he'd been using his badge to access the office after hours, supposedly for project work. But we both knew what he'd really been doing, meeting me in empty conference rooms, using company resources for our personal conversations. I tried to focus on work, but every email notification made me jump. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Mariah. "Need to talk. Can you meet for lunch?" I found Mariah at our usual cafe, but she looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with her coffee cup and avoiding eye contact. "Lisa," she said without preamble, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Okay," I said slowly. "Last week, when you were telling us about your book club meetings at those fancy hotels downtown, you were joking, right? I mean, you're not actually—" She trailed off, but I knew what she was asking. "Mariah, what's this about?" "I got a call this morning from a lawyer. They're asking about group chat messages from our girls' night conversations. Apparently, someone forwarded screenshots of our text thread to them." My mouth went dry. "What screenshots?" Mariah pulled out her phone and showed me our group chat from the previous week. There, in black and white, were my own words. Another successful book club meeting at the Riverside Hotel. The only thing I'm reading is the room service menu. And below that, "Mark is so clueless. I could probably bring Devon home for dinner and introduce him as a work colleague, and Mark would just ask him about cybersecurity protocols. And worst of all, the man bought me a gym bag to support my fitness journey. If he only knew what kind of workouts I'm really getting." "Oh God," I whispered. "Lisa, please tell me this was just you venting, making jokes. Please tell me you're not actually having an affair." I couldn't answer. The evidence was right there in my own words, sent to my closest friends because I'd been so confident, so sure that Mark would never find out. "The lawyer said I might be subpoenaed," Mariah continued. "They want me to testify about the context of these messages. Lisa, I can't lie under oath. I won't lie under oath." "Testify? What are you talking about?" "Your husband filed for annulment. citing adultery and fraud. He's claiming you used marital funds to finance an extramarital affair and that you publicly humiliated him at your office party. The cafe seemed to spin around me. That's impossible. Mark doesn't... He's not... Not what? Not smart enough to figure it out. Lysa, the man works for the federal government tracking down cybercriminals. Did you really think he couldn't track down his own wife's activities? My phone buzzed. Another text, this one from an unknown number. Mrs. Vane, this is attorney Patricia Wells representing your husband in matrimonial proceedings. Please contact our office immediately to arrange service of legal documents. I have to go, I said, standing on shaking legs. Lisa, wait, Mariah called after me. I'm sorry, I never meant for this to happen, but I can't protect you from your own choices. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing through the implications. Mark knew about the affair. He had evidence, bank statements, text messages, probably hotel records, and he'd been building a case against me like I was just another criminal in his files. When I got home, the house was empty. Tessa was at school, and Mark was presumably at work, but there was a note on the kitchen table, in his precise handwriting. Lysandra, I've taken the liberty of changing the passwords on our joint accounts to prevent any further unauthorized expenditures. I've also contacted Tessa's school to inform them that pickup procedures may be changing soon. I suggest you consult with legal counsel at your earliest convenience. M. I ran to his study and tried to log into our bank account, but the password had indeed been changed. Same with our investment accounts, our insurance policies, even our shared streaming services. In the space of a weekend, Mark had systematically cut me off from every aspect of our joint life, and he'd done it so quietly, so methodically, that I hadn't even noticed until it was too late. My phone rang. It was Devin, finally calling me back. Lysa, we have a problem, he said without preamble. It pulled my laptop for a security audit. They found evidence that I've been using company resources for personal activities. I'm suspended pending investigation. What kind of evidence? Everything. Email logs, badge access records, even security camera footage of us in the conference rooms. And Lisa, they're asking about you specifically. They want to know about our relationship. What did you tell them? Nothing yet, but they're threatening to involve law enforcement if they think there's been misuse of federal contractor resources. Lisa, I could lose my security clearance over this. I could lose everything. The panic in his voice was palpable, and I realized that Mark hadn't just been building a case against me. He'd been building cases against everyone involved in our affair. We need to meet, I said. We need to figure out how to handle this. No, Devin said quickly. No more meetings. No more calls. I'm sorry, Lisa, but I can't be associated with this situation anymore. I have to think about my career. He hung up, leaving me alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of the life I'd thought was so secure, so predictable, so boring. I'd underestimated my husband completely. The man I'd mocked for being emotionally distant and oblivious had been quietly, methodically, building a federal quality case against me, and I was just beginning to realize how thoroughly I'd been outmaneuvered. Tuesday morning, I walked into my office building, trying to project an air of normalcy. I'd spent the previous evening consulting with a lawyer who'd given me the grim news. Mark's evidence was extensive, well documented, and legally devastating. But I still had to maintain appearances at work, still had to pretend everything was fine. I made it exactly as far as the reception desk. Lysandra Vane? A woman in a professional suit stepped forward, holding a thick manila envelope. Yes? You've been served. She handed me the envelope in front of 23 coworkers who were picking up their morning coffee and checking their mail. The entire lobby fell silent. Have a good day, the process server said cheerfully, and walked out, leaving me standing there with what felt like a bomb in my hands. I could feel every eye in the lobby on me as I walked to the elevator. By the time I reached my floor, my phone was already buzzing with texts from colleagues who'd witnessed the scene. In my office, I opened the envelope with trembling hands. The documents inside were devastating. Petition for annulment of marriage, citing fraud, adultery, and misuse of marital assets. Attached were 43 exhibits, including bank statements, hotel receipts, text message screenshots, and something called a digital forensics report that was 37 pages long. But the document that made my knees buckle was titled Emergency Motion for Temporary Custody. Mark was asking for immediate primary custody of Tessa, with my visitation restricted to supervised visits only. His reasoning was clinically presented. Respondent has demonstrated a pattern of deception, financial impropriety, and disregard for family stability. Respondent has used marital funds to finance an extramarital relationship while neglecting parental responsibilities. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold the papers. The case number, the court dates, the legal language, it was all so official, so final. I called the elementary school immediately. Mrs. Vane, the secretary said, "I'm glad you called. We received some documentation from your husband this morning regarding pickup procedures. He's requested that he be notified immediately if anyone other than himself attempts to collect Tessa." "What kind of documentation?" "A temporary custody order from the family court. It indicates that visitation arrangements are being modified pending legal proceedings." The room started spinning. "I'm her mother. I pick her up every Tuesday and Thursday." "I understand this must be difficult, Mrs. Vane, but we have to follow court orders. Mr. Vane has provided us with copies of all the relevant documents." After I hung up, I sat in my office chair, staring at the legal papers spread across my desk. In the space of 4 days, Mark had managed to freeze our joint assets, document my affair with forensic precision, and gain legal custody of our daughter. My phone buzzed with a call from my mother. "Lysandra, what in God's name is happening? Your father just got a call from Mark asking for our contact information for legal purposes." "Mum, I can't talk about it right now." "Well, you'd better find time to talk about it, because this is affecting the entire family. Mark mentioned something about testimony and character witnesses. Lysandra, what have you done?" Before I could answer, there was a knock on my office door. Ms. Hau, our HR director, stepped in with a folder in her hands. "Lysandra, I need to speak with you immediately." She closed the door behind her and sat down across from my desk. "I've received some concerning information about your conduct, both at last Friday's holiday party and regarding your relationship with a coworker. I need to ask you directly, are you having an inappropriate relationship with Devin Santos?" "Ms. Shu, I don't think my personal life is—" "It becomes company business when it involves the misuse of company resources, after-hours access violations, and potential security breaches. Devin's laptop contained evidence of personal communications conducted on company time, using company equipment." She opened her folder and pulled out printed emails and chat logs. "These communications reference meetings in company conference rooms for non-business purposes. They also reference the use of company credit cards for personal expenses and the sharing of confidential employee information." I stared at the papers, recognizing my own words printed in black and white. Somehow, Mark had gained access to Devin's work computer and extracted every piece of evidence of our relationship. "I'm placing you on administrative leave pending a full investigation," Ms. Hsu continued. "You'll need to surrender your badge, your company laptop, and any other company property immediately." "You can't do this. I haven't been convicted of anything." "I don't need a conviction, Lysandra. I need to protect this company from liability. Your actions have potentially exposed us to legal action from your husband, security breaches, from unauthorized after-hours access, and violations of our professional conduct policies." As I cleaned out my desk under the watchful eyes of security, I could feel my coworkers staring. The woman who'd been making jokes about her clueless husband just 4 days ago was now being escorted out of the building like a common criminal. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Tessa will be staying with me tonight. Supervised visitation can be arranged through our attorneys. I drove to Tessa's school anyway, hoping to intercept her before Mark arrived. But when I got there, I found a security guard waiting by the pickup area. "Mom, I'm going to need to see some identification." "I'm here to pick up my daughter." "Are you Lysandra Vane?" "Yes." "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I have instructions not to allow you to remove any children from the premises without proper authorization." "I'm her mother." "I understand, ma'am, but I have a court order here that says otherwise." I watched through the chain-link fence as Mark arrived, as Tessa ran to him with her backpack bouncing, as he helped her into his car without even glancing in my direction. That evening, I sat in my empty house, the house I could no longer afford without my job, the house that was probably going to be sold to pay legal fees and restitution, and tried to understand how my life had collapsed so completely in less than a week. I'd thought Mark was emotionally distant, oblivious, buried in his work. But I was beginning to realize that his work had taught him exactly how to dismantle someone's life with methodical precision. And he was just getting started. The call came at 8:47 a.m. on Thursday morning, 2 days after I'd been escorted out of my office building. I was still in my pajamas, staring at my laptop screen and trying to figure out how I was going to afford a lawyer when my phone rang. "Ms. Vane, this is Detective Sarah Chen with the Cyber Crimes Division. We need to speak with you about your involvement in a federal investigation." "Federal investigation?" "We're looking into potential misuse of government contractor resources and unauthorized access to secure systems. Your name has come up in connection with an individual named Devin Santos." My blood ran cold. "I don't understand." "We'll explain everything when we meet. Can you come to our offices this afternoon at 2 p.m? After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen, trying to process what was happening. Mark hadn't just built a case for divorce. He'd apparently triggered a federal investigation. I called the lawyer I'd consulted earlier in the week. "This is worse than I thought," he said after I explained the detective's call. "If they're investigating federal contractor violations, this could involve criminal charges, not just civil proceedings." "Criminal charges for what?" "Conspiracy, fraud, misuse of government resources. If they can prove that you and Mr. Santos used his access to federal systems for personal purposes, or if there's evidence that classified information was compromised." He didn't need to finish. I understood. At 2 p.m., I found myself in a sterile conference room at the federal building, facing Detective Chen and a man who introduced himself as Special Agent Rodriguez from the FBI's Cybercrimes Unit. "Ms. Vane," Detective Chen began, "we're investigating irregularities in the computer systems at Devin Santos's workplace. Mr. Santos held a security clearance and had access to sensitive government databases." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were printouts of email conversations between Devin and me, time-stamped and cross-referenced with his badge access logs. "These communications show that Mr. Santos was accessing secure facilities after hours for personal meetings with you. During these meetings, he had access to classified systems." "We never looked at classified information," I protested. "We were just talking." "Talking in a secure facility while Mr. Santos was logged into government systems," Agent Rodriguez said. "That's a violation of federal security protocols, regardless of intent." They showed me security camera footage, grainy black and white images of Devin and me in what I'd thought was an empty conference room. In the background of several shots, I could see his laptop open, displaying what looked like official documents. "Mr. Santos has been very cooperative with our investigation," Detective Chen continued. "He's provided us with a detailed timeline of your relationship and his security violations." "He's cooperating?" "He's hoping to avoid federal charges by providing testimony about how the violations occurred." He's indicated that you initiated the relationship and suggested the after-hours meetings. I stared at the photos, the email printouts, the official documents. Devon had thrown me under the bus to save his own career. We're not necessarily looking to file charges against you, Agent Rodriguez said, but we need your cooperation in understanding how these security breaches occurred. For the next 2 hours, they walked me through every detail of my relationship with Devon, every after-hours meeting, every conversation we'd had in supposedly secure facilities. They had evidence I didn't even know existed: keycard logs, computer access records, even audio recordings from security systems. By the time I left the federal building, I understood that Mark hadn't just discovered my affair, he'd weaponized it. He'd used his expertise in cyber forensics to build a case that implicated both Devon and me in federal security violations. When I got home, there was another car in my driveway. A woman in a business suit was waiting by my front door. "Ms. Vane, I'm attorney Patricia Wells. I represent your husband in your matrimonial proceedings. He sent his lawyer to my house. I'm here to discuss a settlement offer. May we speak inside?" In my living room, she spread out documents on my coffee table. The same coffee table where Tessa and I had done puzzles just a week ago, back when I'd thought my biggest problem was a boring marriage. "Your husband is prepared to offer you a settlement that avoids a public trial," Attorney Wells said, "but the terms are non-negotiable." She handed me a document titled Settlement Agreement and Release. The terms were brutal: annulment of the marriage, full reimbursement of marital funds used for extramarital activities, 12,140 crowns, itemized down to the penny, surrender of all claims to marital property, and a custody arrangement that gave me supervised visitation with Tessa every other weekend. "If you don't accept this offer," Attorney Wells continued, "your husband is prepared to proceed to trial. The evidence will become public record. Your affair, the federal investigation, the financial impropriety, all of it will be presented in open court. What about my job, my reputation? Ms. Vane, your job is already gone. As for your reputation," she gestured at the stack of evidence on my coffee table, "I think that ship has sailed." She left the documents with me and drove away, leaving me alone with the wreckage of my life spread out on my coffee table. That evening, my phone rang. It was Mariah. "Lisa, I'm so sorry. I just got served with a subpoena. They want me to testify about our group chat conversations." "What are you going to say?" "The truth. I have to tell the truth. The screenshots are all there in black and white. There's no way to deny what you wrote." After she hung up, I walked through my house, the house that would soon belong to someone else, and tried to understand how I'd gotten here. I'd thought I was so clever, so modern, so sophisticated. I'd mocked my husband's blindness to my affair, never realizing that he'd been watching everything, documenting everything, building a case against me with the same methodical precision he brought to federal investigations. I'd underestimated him completely. And now I was going to pay for that mistake with everything I'd ever cared about. The mediation session was scheduled for 9 a.m. on Monday morning in a sterile conference room at Attorney Wells's law firm. I arrived 15 minutes early, hoping to compose myself before facing Mark for the first time since the night of the office party. When I walked into the conference room, I stopped short. Mark was already there, sitting calmly at the far end of a polished table, wearing the same composed expression he'd worn that night in the doorway. But he wasn't alone. Attorney Wells sat to his right, surrounded by banker's boxes and file folders. To his left sat a woman I didn't recognize, blonde, professional, with the kind of confident bearing that suggested she was used to winning. "Ms. Vane," Attorney Wells said, "this is Jennifer Morrison, our forensic accountant. She's prepared a comprehensive analysis of the financial aspects of your case." I took a seat across from them, feeling like I was facing a tribunal. My own lawyer, a tired-looking man named David Kim, who'd been the only attorney willing to take my case on short notice, sat beside me, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Before we begin," Attorney Wells said, "I want to make sure you understand the scope of evidence we've compiled." She nodded to someone behind me, and the lights dimmed. A projector screen descended from the ceiling. "This is a timeline of your extramarital activities, cross-referenced with financial records, digital communications, and witness statements." The first slide appeared, and my stomach dropped. It was a detailed calendar showing every day I'd claimed to be at the gym, cross-referenced with hotel charges, Devin's badge access logs, and even weather reports. "September 15th, Attorney Wells narrated. You told your husband you were attending a fitness class. Your joint credit card shows a charge at the Riverside Hotel. Mr. Santos's badge logs show he accessed his office building at 6:47 p.m. and left at 9:23 p.m. Security cameras show both of you entering the hotel at 7:15 p.m. She clicked to the next slide. "September 22nd, same pattern. October 6th, October 13th, October 20th. Each slide showed another date, another hotel charge, another lie I told Mark about, where I was spending our money and my time. In total," Jennifer Morrison interjected, "we've documented 47 instances of fraudulent expenses totaling $12,840.63 in marital funds used to finance extramarital activities." The slides kept coming. Screenshots of my group chat messages, where I'd bragged about deceiving Mark. Photos from the office party, where I'd publicly humiliated him. Bank records showing the pattern of deception going back 6 months. But the slide that made me physically sick was a screenshot of a text I'd sent to Devin. "Mark is working late again. Sometimes I think I could burn the house down, and he wouldn't notice unless it interfered with his Wi-Fi signal." This message was sent on October 30th, Attorney Wells said, the same day your husband was working overtime to solve a case involving identity theft that had victimized 17 elderly citizens. He was, quite literally, working to protect vulnerable people while you were mocking his dedication. I looked across the table at Mark, hoping to see some flicker of emotion, some sign that this was as painful for him as it was for me. But his expression remained perfectly calm, perfectly analytical. "The most damaging evidence," Attorney Wells continued, "comes from your own words at the office party." The screen filled with a video, Mark's recording from that night. I watched myself, wineglass raised, making jokes about my husband's blindness, while 23 coworkers laughed. "Here's to Mark, the most trusting husband in America. May he never change his password or check his credit card statements too closely." Hearing my own words played back in that sterile conference room, I finally understood how cruel I'd been. I'd publicly humiliated a man who'd never been anything but loyal to me, who'd worked 60-hour weeks to provide for our family, who'd trusted me completely. "Your husband has prepared a final settlement offer," Attorney Wells said, handing me a document. "These terms are non-negotiable." I read through the agreement with shaking hands. Immediate annulment of the marriage, full reimbursement of $12,147.63 through in fraudulent expenses, surrender of all claims to marital property, including the house, cars, and retirement accounts, custody of Tessa to remain with Mark, with supervised visitation every other weekend, a non-disclosure agreement preventing me from discussing the case publicly, agreement not to contest any professional consequences resulting from my actions. "If you don't sign this agreement," Attorney Wells said, "we'll proceed to trial. Everything you've seen today will become public record. The evidence will be presented in open court with media present." "What about Tessa?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Mark spoke for the first time since I'd entered the room. "Tessa will be protected from this," he said quietly. "That's my only priority now. I want to see her. Supervised visitation can be arranged once you've signed the agreement and completed the financial restitution." I looked at my lawyer, hoping for some alternative, some way out of this nightmare. But David Kim just shook his head. "Lysandra, this is the best offer you're going to get. If this goes to trial, you could face criminal charges, civil liability, and complete public humiliation. I thought about Tessa, about the life I'd destroyed with my arrogance and selfishness. I thought about Mark, sitting across from me with that same calm expression he'd worn the night he'd recorded my presentation. I'd thought I was so clever, so modern, so sophisticated. I'd mocked his blindness while he'd been quietly, methodically building an airtight case against me. With a trembling hand, I signed the agreement. Attorney Wells collected the documents and handed me a key ring. The house keys. Mr. Vane will need those returned through our office. As I stood to leave, Mark finally looked directly at me. I hope you understand, he said quietly, that this was never about revenge. This was about consequences. Actions have consequences, Lysandra, even when you think nobody's watching. I walked out of that conference room with nothing but my purse and my car keys. No home, no job, no husband, no daughter. Just the devastating realization that I'd destroyed everything that mattered because I'd underestimated the man who'd loved me enough to trust me completely. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and finally allowed myself to cry. Not for my marriage, which had been over the moment I decided to betray it. Not for my career, which I'd destroyed with my own poor choices. I cried for Tessa, who would grow up knowing that her mother had chosen a cheap thrill over her family's stability. I cried for Mark, who'd had to become someone cold and calculating, just to protect himself and his daughter from the woman who was supposed to love them both. And I cried for the woman I used to be, before I'd convinced myself that I deserved better than loyalty, better than trust, better than a man who'd worked every day to build a life with me. My phone buzzed with a final text from Attorney Wells. Keys can be dropped off at our office by 5 p.m. today. Mr. Vane has asked me to tell you that he hopes you find the help you need to understand why you made these choices. Even in his final message, Mark was being more generous than I deserved. I drove to the law office, dropped off the keys to the house where I'd raised my daughter, and walked away from the wreckage of the life I'd thrown away for a few months of excitement and attention. The man I'd mocked for being blind had seen everything, and he'd handled it with more dignity and precision than I'd ever shown in our entire marriage.